Part 1, example.
I only need to take one measurement on a circle and I can find the area. It could be the radius, diameter, or circumference. There aren't many shapes that require only one measurement to find the area.
The world's largest coin is a giant gold coin minted in Canada. It has a circumference of about 61 9/10 inches and weighs about 220 pounds. What is the area to the nearest square inch of the face of this coin? Use 3.14 for pi.
Our given information is telling us that the circumference is 61 9/10 inches. And it's also telling us to use 3.14 for pi. Now, the information that is there to distract us will be the weight. We do not need to know the weight in order to find what this question is asking, which it says, what is the area to the nearest square inch of the face of the coin? So we have to find the area, and we do not need to know the weight in order to find the area of the coin. In this question, it only gives us the circumference, but we need to find the area. So we have to think about the formula for circumference. Well, we know two of them. One is circumference equals pi times diameter, or the other one is circumference equals 2 times pi times the radius. So we have to look at these formulas. What do we need that's a part of the circumference formula that we also need in the area formula? Well, obviously pi, but what else? So we're going to need the radius. So we're going to use this second formula to figure out the radius, and then we'll be able to figure out the area. Here is the formula. Now I'm going to substitute in the information. It told us the circumference was 61 9/10. So I'm going to make sure I substitute that in for the circumference. I'm going to bring down the 2, and it also told me to use 3.14 for pi, and then I'm going to bring down my radius. Now I'm going to simplify both sides. This side is already simplified. Now I have to do 2 times 3.14, which is 6 28/100, and bring down your radius. Now the radius in 6 28/100 is connected through multiplication, so that means I have to do the inverse, or the opposite of multiplication, and divide the 6 28/100 on both sides. So that's simplified to just r. And now I'm going to simplify this other side. I'm going to round it to the tenths place, which brings me to about 9 9/10. Now I found out my radius. So I can use this information to find out the area. Now all I do is write the formula for area of a circle, which is area equals pi times the radius squared. Now I'm going to substitute in the information. Again, it told us to use 3.14 for pi, and the radius we found out was about 9 9/10. You could put the square inside or outside of the parentheses. It doesn't matter. So now we're going to square the 9 9/10. Make sure you remember to square first. Remember to square first. That means multiply 9 9/10 by 9 9/10. And when I multiply that, I get 98 100. Now I have to multiply that by 3 1400, and I get 307 7500 rounded, but it said round to the nearest square inch. So that means to the ones place. So when I round it, I get about 308, and do not forget your units. So it will be 308 inches squared. Remember, area, no matter what shape it is always going to be squared. So this is the final answer, 308 inches squared. Part 1, got it.
A circle has a circumference of 22 centimeters. What is the approximate area of the circle? Use 3.14 for pi.
This data is just like the example. It gives us the circumference, but we have to find the area. So that means we're going to use the circumference formula with radius in it because we need the radius in order to find the area. So the circumference formula is circumference equals 2 times pi times the radius. Now we're going to substitute 22 in for the circumference. It tells us right here. Then you're going to bring down your 2, substitute 3.14 in for pi, and bring down radius. Now you're going to simplify. You have to make sure you multiply the 2 and the 3.14 first before you start isolating the variable. So that'll be 6 and 28 hundredths times the radius. Now we're going to divide 6 and 28 hundredths on both sides of the equal sign because those two are connected through multiplication. That simplifies to just the radius. And 22 divided by 6 and 28 hundredths, if I round it, it is about 3 5/10. So the radius is about 3 1/2. Now I can figure out what the area is by using the formula, which is area equals pi times the radius squared. I'm going to substitute 3 1400ths in for pi, and we found out the radius was about 3 5/10, and I'm going to square that. Again, it doesn't matter if you put the square inside or outside of the parentheses. So first I'm going to do is square 3 5/10. So that means 3 5/10 times 3 5/10. And when I multiply that, I end up with 12 and 25 hundredths. Now I have to multiply that by 3 and 14 hundredths. And then I get this decimal here. And now I'm going to round it to, let's say, the tenths place. So it'll be 38 and 5/10. And do not forget your units. We are talking about centimeters. And remember, area is always squared. So this will be our final answer. 38 and 5/10 centimeters squared. Part 2, example.
Complete the table. Describe a pattern in the relationship between the ratio of area, A, to circumference, C, and the radius. Then use your pattern to predict the ratio of A to C of a circle with a radius of 32 centimeters.
The first section of this chart is complete already, so now what we're going to do is figure out the area when the radius is 6. So we can write our formula, which is area equals pi times the radius squared. We're going to substitute in 6 for the radius. Remember to leave it in terms of pi, which makes this much easier. So now when I multiply 6 times 6, which is squaring, I get 36. So that means the area when the radius is 6 is 36 pi, and this will be centimeters squared. When the radius is 6, that means the area will be 36 pi, and we're not going to put the units because the units are already up here. So now I'm going to do the circumference for when the radius is 6. So I'm going to use the circumference formula that has radius in it, which is 2 times pi times the radius. I'm going to bring down circumference, bring down 2, bring down pi, and just substitute in 6. Now I'm going to multiply the 6 times 2, which is 12, and that will be pi, and our units will just be centimeters, not centimeters squared. So that will be 12 pi here. Now for the ratio A over C, I am just going to put the area over the circumference, which will be 36 pi over 12 pi. And if I simplify that, that will be 3 over 1, because the pi simplify. And then 36 divided by 12, that will be 3. And then we're going to leave it as a fraction as over 1. So this will be the second part of this table. All right, the next part is when the radius is h. So I'm going to do the same thing to find the area. First, I'm going to write the formula, which is area equals pi times the radius squared. Now I'm going to go ahead and bring down area and pi and substitute 8 in for radius and then square it. So 8 times 8 is 64, so the area will be 64 pi, and that will be centimeters squared. So I'm just going to put 64 pi here because it already has the units. Now I have to find the circumference. Again, we're going to use the one that have radius in it, which is circumference equals 2 times pi times the radius. Now I'm going to bring down circumference, bring down 2, bring down pi, and substitute in 8 for the radius. Now I have to multiply 2 times 8, which is 16, and bring down pi. So the final answer will be 16 pi centimeters. I'm going to put 16 pi here because there are already units at the top of the chart. Now this part, you put 64 pi over 16 pi, and then you go ahead and simplify. The pi's cancel out. 16 go into 64 4 times, so it will be 4 over 1. This is how the chart looks when it's complete. When the radius is 10, the area will be 100 pi, and that's centimeters squared. The circumference will be 20 pi, and that's centimeters. The ratio area over circumference will be 100 pi over 20 pi. Remember, the pi's will cancel out, and then 100 divided by 20 will be 5, and leave it as a fraction over 1. Alright, a pattern that I notice if I'm comparing this fraction in simplest form to the radius, I notice that the fraction a over c, it is 1/2 the radius. So if we're trying to find when the radius is 32, then the simplest form when the ratio is a over c, then the simplest form will be half of that. So half of 32 will be 16. So this is how the answer will look if we went ahead and did this whole chart. It would end up being 16 over 1. Because if we notice, the a over c in simplest form is half of the radius. Part 2, got it.
The ratio of the area of a circle to the circumference of a circle, A to C, is 11 to 1. What is the circumference of the circle? Leave your answer in terms of pi.
This is one of those problems that requires you to find an important fact before you can solve it. You can use the pattern that you found in the example to calculate the radius. Once you find the radius, you have all you need to find the circumference.
We are going to take the advice that he just gave us about the chart that we just completed. What did we learn about this, the simplest form, and the radius? What was the pattern? Well, we know that we had to double to get the radius. So double the simplest form to get the radius. 11 over 1, if we double that, that would be 22 over 1. So that means the radius would equal 22. Now we can use that to figure out the circumference. So we have two different circumference formula, one with diameter, one with radius. Since we have the radius, we're going to go ahead and use the one with the radius. So the formula for circumference with radius is circumference equals 2 times pi times the radius. We are going to bring down circumference, bring down 2, bring down pi because it said leave it in terms of pi. And then we are going to substitute in 22 for the radius. Now all we have to do is multiply 2 times 22, which is 44, and we shall leave our answer as 44 pi and then whatever the units are. So the final answer will be circumference equals 44 pi units, not squared. Remember, area is only squared. Part 2, got it? 2 of 2.
Use formulas to show why the ratio A to C equals 1/2 times R.
I'm going to rewrite this ratio, and I'm going to substitute in the actual formulas for area and circumference. So the area of a circle is actually pi times the radius squared, and the area for circumference that has radius in it is 2 times pi times the radius. Now I'm going to rewrite the area formula, and this is how it looks when you rewrite it. Pi times the radius times the radius. That's all squaring is. It's multiplying it by itself. Now I'm going to bring this formula over 2 times pi times the radius. Now I can divide out the common factor. In this case, I can divide out the radius, one of them, and then I can divide out pi. So all I'm left with is radius over 2. And if we look over here, we should know that multiplying by 1/2 is the same as dividing by 2. So if I rewrote this, it would look like 1/2 times the radius is equal to 1/2 times the radius.